Hi there, this is Solitaire Ronan from Solitaire Ronan Films, and welcome to another random review. Today's random review comes from Russell Rouse in 1956, and it's The Fastest Gun Alive, starring Glenn Ford, Jeanne Crain and Broderick Crawford. Now this is one of my all-time favourite westerns. You can look up on my channel, I did several videos years ago about films that should be on a Blu-ray, and The Fastest Gun Alive was on those lists. It's quite interesting looking back in those videos, and you'll actually see that quite a lot of those films have got themselves Blu-ray releases after all these years. And I was so happy to see Warner Archive releasing The Fastest Gun Alive. Now, as you'll see from my background, I am in a different location. I did manage to survive moving home, which was very stressful as I didn't get the keys of the new place until 5:15 on the moving date. But we survived, and as you can see, I haven't improved my setup much. That's certainly in the works to try and get a better camera and a better setup. But I thought I would make my first video a celebration of a film that gets neglected, and a film that, as I say, only recently has had a Blu-ray release. It's shot in black and white, and it really does pop on Blu-ray. Russell Rouse directed a few films, probably slightly more famous for being a writer. He wrote DOA, and bizarrely he wrote Pillow Talk, or co-wrote Pillow Talk with Rock Hudson and Doris Day. But The Fastest Man Alive is so good. Again, it's another one of those short, sweet, perfectly economical westerns, psychological westerns that we love from the 50s. It's kind of a nice double bill with Henry King's The Gunfighter with Henry Fonda from 1950, because it's more about reputation, what makes a man, the idea of machismo and hero worship, and it goes into all the psychology of that. It has some twists and turns that you perhaps don't expect. Glenn Ford, who is kind of plays paranoia pretty well. He's not, on the Ray Milland grand scale of paranoia and feeling guilty, but he certainly is on that list. There's a list of films featuring great sweaters. African Queen, Everybody Sweats. Sergio Leone films, Everybody Sweats. But Glenn Ford seems to be the only character in this film that sweats continuously in every scene. His brow is soaked with sweat, because he is fighting what's in himself. He stars as a character who runs a store featuring women's hats and dresses, but he has a past. For he may be the fastest gun alive, but he's promised his wife, Jeanne Crain, to get rid of his guns, settle down, because obviously there's an emotional weight, a psychological weight, the stress on the marriage, so he's trying to become normal and fit into society. But in his town, the hero worship or the legendary tales of gunfighters, and to be a man you have to wear a gun, which Glenn Ford doesn't do. You want to be a gunfighter or a cattle hand, that's proper man's work. So he's constantly having little barbs about how he doesn't wear a gun, he doesn't drink alcohol. Real men wear guns and drink alcohol. So the whole film is basically about machismo and what makes a man. It has one of those casts of character actors that you probably would not perhaps recognise their name, but you'd recognise their face. The obvious exception is Russ Tamblyn, who appears as a young man who bizarrely gets a dance routine in the middle of the film for no real reason, apart from he gets to dance with shovels. I mean, it's a wonderful sequence, but it does feel a little bit forced. But so that gives a quite bizarre episode in the film. You have Alan Jocelyn, again, not a name you would recognise, but you recognise his face. He always kind of plays snivelling rat type characters. In this case, he's always barbing Glenn Ford with comments, about his occupation and the fact he doesn't wear a gun and, bigging himself up. He's always undermining Glenn Ford. And if you look at his career, he's always kind of playing those kind of characters, kind of smarmy know-it-alls, but don't actually know everything. And then you have Leif Erikson, who always plays the kind of stoic, upright members of society. I think he did play a couple of villains in his time doing his westerns. Again, you'd recognise his face instantly, but perhaps not his name. John Denner, another one. He always looks a bit like a wolf with his moustache. Kind of like a low-grade Lee Van Cleef, but that's not any slight on John Denner. And you get Rhys Williams, who's a kind of big burly guy who generally plays barman, and strangely enough he plays the owner of the bar in this western. John Duchette, again another character actor from lots of westerns you'd recognise. Chubby Johnson, again a familiar face to western fans. And Joseph Sweeney, who played the older gentleman, the older juror in 12 Angry Men. He plays the minister. So very much, you could almost argue, again, this is almost like Blazing Saddles. Blazing Saddles has like a major influenced by The Fastest Gun Alive, because there features a church, and one of the big scenes is in the church where the community is kind of discussing what to do. That's basically almost not word for word in Blazing Saddles, but certainly the scene is lifted straight from The Fastest Gun Alive. So it's a ticking clock film, essentially, very much like High Noon, very much like The Gunfighter I mentioned before. So you have Broderick Crawford as the leader of a three-man gang with John Denner and another actor that I haven't mentioned, but again another familiar face. And we're introduced to him, and they come into another town, and he's looking for this character who he's heard is the fastest gun. And Broderick Crawford's character is obsessed with he has to be the fastest gun, and nobody's faster than him. It's quite a modern film in the sense of it is a really good kind of study of psychopathy and kind of this burning desire, regardless of any other interests or concerns. He's got to know whether this person is faster than him, even although that might mean that he is killed. So, spoiler alert, he kills this guy, but because the guy drew first, it's pretty much, oh yeah, he was justified, even though he goaded him into, because the other guy's like, I don't really care who's faster, I'm not really interested, whereas Broderick Crawford's character has this pathological desire to know who's faster than him. So they go into another town, they rob a bank, and they're on the run, and of course they come into Glenn Ford's town just to get a rest, change horses, and get out. Now everybody's in the church, haven't really explained it well, because by this time Glenn Ford has been goaded by Alan Jocelyn and all the other ones, because they've heard about the Broderick Crawford's character gunning this guy down because they thought he was the fastest. So they're all telling stories in the bar about who was the fastest, and Alan Jocelyn, for example, is telling them how he would do it and how he shoots. And then Glenn Ford, because there's this pressure building up in him, you can just tell that he's about to snap. He feels the power of the gun. It's like the quote by Chow Yun-fat and John Woo's The Killer about guns, easy to pick up, hard to put down. John Woo's cinema, apart from being homoerotic, is about the draw of the gun, the lure of the gun, the power of having a gun in your hand, which is always a substitute for something else. So at this point, Glenn Ford has shed airplane amounts of sweat, and so you can tell he's about to snap. So he goes to the bar, because obviously Jeanne Crain is worried about him and wants him to try and stay away from trouble, because it has hounded him throughout his life. But he snaps, starts drinking whiskey, and of course all the men are like, "What are you doing? You're drinking whiskey, you don't drink." And then he's listening to all their stories about fast guns, as if they have no experience of it, but they just like talking, as most men do. And he finally snaps, and he tells them that he's the fastest gun alive, and he gives them a demonstration. And then once he's given them that demonstration, then he's part of like the man club. They like him because he's shown off he can use a gun, because again, in that aspect, that makes you a man. And obviously, as I said, running a convenience store doesn't make you a man, but being able to show off with a gun, that makes you a man. So cut to the church. Everybody's in the church. Broderick Crawford's gang is in the bar wondering where everybody is. They come across the son of Rhys Williams, the barman, who's not in church. And they're talking to the kid, blah 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 blah. The kid's got a wee toy gun, a wee wooden gun, and Broderick Crawford's talking and being animalistic and brutal. It's probably Broderick Crawford at his most brutal and animalistic, even though he's obviously made a living being brutal and animalistic in films. And John Denner happens to mention, that Broderick Crawford's the fastest gun alive, and aren't you impressed, little boy, blah, blah, blah. And the little boy goes, "Oh, there's a faster gun in this town," which is exactly what Glenn Ford has been running from, the same way Gregory Peck in The Gunfighter is tired of everybody trying to square him down to go, "Oh, show me how quick you are," and getting into duels all the time. That's what they're trying to escape. And because Broderick Crawford, despite a posse coming after him because of the bank, he's got to know who this person is. He's got to know whether he's faster than him. So all rational thought of, maybe we should actually get out of town because there's a posse coming and we're going to get hung, that's out the window, because he's got to know. So he sets the town and everybody in the church to send the guy out who's the fastest gun, or he's going to burn the town down. So I'll leave it at that as far as the plot. But there's so much going on. Again, the conversations in the church are wonderful. The psychological implications, the way the town kind of changes their opinion of Glenn Ford. Obviously before they knew, after they knew, and then Glenn Ford's decision, Glenn Ford's backstory, the notches on his gun handle perhaps don't mean what people think they mean. It's a lot smarter and more psychologically interesting than perhaps you look at it in face value. again, this is probably my favourite Glenn Ford film. I think it's one of his best performances, even though, as I said, he does sweat profusely, just to add to the tension. Again, with a lot of these westerns, a lot of these film noirs from the 50s, it's just paced absolutely perfectly. Again, you've got the ticking clock, which always helps. It's just great performances. Again, there's archetypes in the town that I've mentioned, those character actors. Jeanne Crain, excellent. Who never really became a huge star, but is absolutely wonderful in everything I've seen. She was the ranch owner in Kirk Douglas's Man Without a Star, which was a really tough performance. She was in the Jean Tierney film noir Leave Her to Heaven, which is excellent. That's in colour. You should check that out as well. But never kind of made it to huge stardom, but she's fantastic in this. And again, seeing it in Blu-ray, the black and white cinematography really pops. You do feel Glenn Ford is a man trapped by his past and his guilt and his own psychology. Again, watching a double bill with Henry King's Gunfighter with Gregory Peck from 1950. And again, the next time you watch this church scene in Blazing Saddles, it pretty much came from here. But it's just a wonderful western. As I said, it's one of my favourite westerns, and certainly I think it's probably my favourite Glenn Ford film. 89 minutes, just paced perfectly. It's simple, straightforward story, but it does have a lot going on psychologically. And it's just quite fantastic. So thanks very much for watching. I'm not sure how many videos I'll be putting out soon. I need to reorganise my collection because it's going to sound terrible, but these aren't in order. These were just unpacked and put on shelves. I'm hoping that this blue wall can get shelved floor to ceiling. I'm hoping to get a quote for that next week. But I will try and get some of them in order because it is bugging me that they're not in order of label and spine number and things. It's outrageous. So thanks for putting up with this terrible, terrible layout. And hopefully you'll join me again for more videos. And one other extra note, I do thank everybody who left very kind messages wishing me good luck with the move. I really appreciate it, and that's why another reason why the YouTube Blu-ray community that we have is so fantastic. So thanks very much for watching. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films saying farewell.